Hello and welcome to our webinar, Menio and Red Rock presents Find the Funds, featuring Dr. Jenny House of Red Rock Reports. Some quick housekeeping details here. Each of you that are in the webinar should have a sidebar there to the left of the presentation window. If you can hear me, please go ahead and in the chat window, give me a smiley face so I can make sure we have a good sound check for those of you that might have just joined us. All right, so we got some smiles out there. I want to also mention that throughout today's presentation, I want you to feel free to use the chat window to ask any questions that you might have. We will do our best to address those questions as we go. The questions that we are not able to get to will be answered during the Q&A session following the presentation. And then shortly after the webinar today, we will be sending out an email to all registrants that will contain a link to the recording. This presentation will remain available on demand, so you can just sit back, put your feet up, and watch at your leisure. So at this time, I'd like to welcome our presenter today, which is Dr. Jenny House. As you can see there on the screen, Dr. Jenny House is a very skilled individual. She's had a lot of experiences that is going to provide a lot of insight to find the funds. So today, Dr. House will be using that vast knowledge of educational funding to guide us through strategies to uncover and use 21st Century Community Learning Center grants. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. House. Jenny?
Thank you very much. So, hi, today I'm going to talk about different grants. And actually, last time I talked about 21st Century Community Learning Centers. Today I'm actually going to focus on the different Race to the Top programs and the I3 grants, or Invest in Innovation grants. But I'm going to start off I always like to start off and give you a synopsis what's happened in the last week in Washington that's going to impact your funds at the school and district levels. So I'll talk a little bit about sequestration, as though you haven't heard enough about it on television, and the congressional budget, which on March 27th there's something that's important that's going to happen there. A little bit about the state recoveries. So without any more I will get going on this one. So let's start with sequestration, also known as the funding cliff. So March 1st, we all got the bad news that Congress and the President, they could not get together and get us a solution. So sequestration did kick in. So you know, there was a lot of doom and gloom. This is going to be the end of the earth. You know, all the programs are going to be cut by 8%, in fact, 8.2%. Big cuts to Title I, big cuts to IDEA. But actually, as it's turned out, it's going to be about a 5.1% cut. But who and what and when does this happen? Right now, the only program that's really being impacted is Impact Aid. And if you aren't familiar with that particular program, it's the money that the federal government gives to the school districts that are either on federal property or Indian lands, or they have all the parents in the area work for the federal government. And the reason those areas are significant is they don't have a tax base. So the federal government provides what's called Impact Aid. Now, those programs, because as you heard, it's federal workers, you know, and it's just like the federal programs in Washington, they are being cut now. We haven't seen the exact figures of what each district's cut will be, but that's the only one now. The rest of it will actually not take place until the new fiscal year, which actually begins July 1. You know, and then it really doesn't take effect until school is back in session, except for money during the summer for Title I programs or special ed programs that may be taking place over the summer. So think about that. That actually gives Congress still a lot of time that they may come to some resolution whether they do away with sequestration or whether they soften the impact or reduce sequestration, you know, there are many different things that are on the table right now. As you all hear every day on television and read in the newspapers. So, you know, if you're not in a federal school that has impact aid, right now it's probably not impacting you. We do know a lot of districts have withheld some of their Title I money up to 15% or their special ed money, and they're, you know, holding it just in case. But there are really some different rules that apply in some of the different states that they can't hold that past June 30th. So, you know, there may be a lot of money between now and June 30th that has to be spent or at least obligated. That means that the invoices have been cut and the orders are put in, but the payment may not happen until later. So that's something really to be watching, and you'll all be hearing a lot more of that. But sequestration is the big one. I wanted to also just tell you that Common Core state adoptions, I talked a little bit about that on our last funding webinar, but this is still getting bigger and bigger across the country in terms of activities for, you know, all of the different standards that are out, the English language arts, the reading language arts standards, the math standards, and now the new generation science standards. You know, so those the states are really adopting. Now you see Alaska, Texas, Nebraska, and Virginia still, you know, have not adopted them, but there's a lot of noise coming, in fact, that they may adopt them because the federal government is saying that they cannot apply for many of the programs and the funds that are coming from the federal government unless they've adopted Common Core. So that's a stay tuned. And you also may notice that Minnesota is a different color. They have only adopted English language arts standards at this point, not the math standards. So the Common Core state adoption is big, and I think a lot of districts over the summer are going to be either developing activities or purchasing activities that align with the Common Core standards to help teachers to be able to have the children meet or exceed those standards in the new school year. And remember, in 2014, that's when these students are supposed to go online and take assessments online across the country. So there's also a lot of technology purchases and learning to take a test online. There are a lot of open-ended questions. So is it word processing? Is it oral language? You know, there's a lot coming. So this is going to be an interesting spring, summer, and fall on that one. So I also, and that was kind of the state update. A lot of the states, let me go back just, a lot of the states with the Common Core standards are passing state initiatives to buy the technology for the online assessments, as well as digital content that aligns with the standards. And you may be doing the exact same thing. The good news is, even with sequestration, the economy is improving. It's slow, but it is improving. And the construction of houses, which is always a big harbinger of good things that are coming, as the economy improves and the state coffers start to fill up again, money will be released for this. But a lot of states, as we're tracking them, the purchases and the money are to buy digital content and or equipment to be able to teach to, learn to, or implement the Common Core standards. So let's go to the funds that we're really going to study today. First is Race to the Top. Now, actually, there are 3 Race to the Top programs. There's the states that received Race to the Top grants. There's the Early Learning Challenge grants, and those came in 2 waves that are for ages 0 through 8. And then last December, there were the district grants that were made that some of the districts are doing. And right now in Congress, they're actually talking about Race to the Top for colleges. But these are the 3 we're going to focus on today. So let's start with Race to the Top state. This actually came in 2 waves. The first 2 states that were granted these awards were Tennessee and Delaware, $500 million and $100 million. A lot of money. When a state gets a state grant, about 50% of it stays at the state level. And what the State Department is doing, it doesn't just go to state salaries as some people think. They are to build a longitudinal data system that tracks student progress, school finance. It's a very big system. And one of the big systems that's being built that a lot of people forget about is a student improvement system. And this is one you ought to look, if you're in any of these states, any of these 12 states, the student improvement system is to provide content and professional development online that provides equity of access, whether you're a small district or whether you're a large urban district or a suburban district, you all have access to some great activities that are the same no matter who you are. So what they're doing is purchasing licenses and putting these online for you to be able to use in your districts. Tennessee has been doing a lot of work on that. An interesting way Massachusetts and Ohio are dealing with that is they're pooling their money for this student improvement system or instructional improvement system. I think that's what they're calling it. They're putting their money together and building a system and putting the assets on the system. Other states have said they may come in on that as well. But the good news for you, if I were still in the schools, I would be very excited because there are going to be a lot of things that are going to be available there that will be above and beyond what I'm purchasing in my own school district. So that's what's happening at the state level. They're really putting in these big data systems to be able to track students, track teachers, and to be able to provide assets for teaching and learning. The key areas that each state has to address, so these are important for you to know because these have to be met. So if you have something you want to do in your district, if you're in a participating district, these are the things that, really need to be addressed. And as I go through these, the important thing to remember is any of the programs coming out of the federal government are addressing these same 4 areas. One is adopt standards and assessments to prepare for college and careers. Okay, standards, we've already talked about Common Core standards and the assessments that go with those. But the big one that you need to hear is that prepare for college and careers. And don't forget, Title I's new name is Career and College Readiness, okay? So that's the common theme. Second is what I was just talking about. Build data systems that measure student growth and success and inform teachers and principals how to improve instruction. So that's what the state departments are building, those big data systems. Third is recruit, develop, reward, and retain effective teachers, especially where they are needed most. Now, this is a gotcha for a lot of the states right now, is teacher evaluation must be tied to student achievement. The federal government isn't saying how to do that. They're just saying in some way, and it doesn't all have to be tied to student achievement, because we know there's multiple factors that come into whether a child improves his or her performance. But they do want some of that tied to it. And so that really means that the teachers must sign on to whatever the plan is. And that's been harder than everybody thought in most of the states to get that done. And finally, the last one is turn around those lowest performing students. 5 to 15% of the lowest performing schools, need to be turned around. Now, you notice that I have some red areas. Those are the areas that most of the states have not finished yet. And that's important because, how are you going to really show growth? Because these awards were made in 2009, okay? Well, they are 4-year grants, so we're getting to where these should be coming to an end, and yet these things haven't been done in those states. So this is really the latest news. It was all supposed to be done by December 31st, 2013. Isn't going to happen. So by June 2013. So by December 31st, 2013, those states can apply for extensions through another year. Why do they need that? See that 50% in red? In fact, more than 50% of the Race to the Top money, and you saw how many millions, and actually it's billions, that were allocated for that or awarded for that, more than 50% has not been spent yet. So there's a lot of money that needs to be spent in a short period of time. And to do it all next year is actually, y'all say, let me have the chance to spend that money. That's pretty much of a challenge to really spend it and show that growth. So you can apply for an extension by next January, if you think about it, or December 31st. Then you have until July 31st, 2014, which is what it's supposed to be now to finish. The extensions will go to July 31st, 2015. And so it all has to be obligated. And remember, obligated just means that the POs are cut, the orders are taken, but sometimes the services or the products haven't been delivered to where the money, actually changes hands. But all money must change hands. And remember, this is the extensions by October 1st, 2015, or it goes back to the federal government. Okay? So if you're in any of those 12 states, this is good news, and you need to inform your district that that opportunity has just been announced, that states and the participating districts can apply for extensions. Might mean that it's not all parts of it, that you get some parts of your plan, you do get extensions, others you don't. You have to justify why you need more time, okay? The second type of Race to the Top early learning challenge is the early learning challenge. Now, early learning is, as the federal government defines it, is 0 to 8. And you're thinking 0. Really what they have found is children with disabilities, or, they're in a family that doesn't speak English, or, that have challenging environments. The younger that the help can be given to them, the more chance that they have for success in school, careers, colleges. So this program is really to address this. If you think of, so it's really daycare centers, preschools, and primary grades, because age 8, your third grade. All right? So 0 through 8. So if you're in any of those environments, and these were the first states, notice those amounts are significantly less. But you're not talking about, the whole schools. You're not talking about middle schools. You're not talking about high schools. So it's much less. But you do have a new constituency, like daycare centers and some of the local health centers. So these new states that you see here, these first 8, it's around, the average is around $55 million. So if you're in those states, that's good. Here was phase 2 that were added last December: Colorado, Illinois, New Mexico, Oregon, and Wisconsin. So those are the states that they're focusing on. I want to go back to the original states. Maryland and North Carolina have actually been doing something that's very unique, that is part of this Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge that you need to know about. And that is a rating system. So rating the preschool, rating the daycare center, that's huge. So they have a rubric on, how are the teachers, how are the qualified teachers there, because daycare centers, a lot of times, people that have been teachers or managers of those, they don't even have a college degree. So, they've had no training on how to work with young children. So one of the big parts is evaluating the teachers, evaluating the condition of the school, evaluating the equipment, and now technology is a big part of that. Digital equipment, digital content for these young children. So all of that, it'll be rating the school, it'll be rating the teachers, it'll be rating the learning instructional content, and the equipment to be able to do that. And the last part is the parent engagement, because we know that success with these young children needs to be supported with parents. And as I said, we had a second round in December. The third Race to the Top area also was December, these awards came. And these are districts that were allowed to have Race to the Top awards. Now this was $400 million that was divided among 16 awards. Now if you notice the first 3, those are just straight districts, right? Nevada, South Carolina, California. Look at the Green River Regional Education Cooperative. Those are rural school districts, 24 of them, that are part of the award. But the reason they got it is making sure that there's equity of access in teacher quality, instructional content, ability to have the technology to be able to communicate. So really some exciting things being done, in the small rural. Then you see another different one, which is the Harmony Science Academy. And these are a consortium of public schools that are really focused on STEM. Very exciting type. Here's some more of them, the rest of them, where you see, if you look at the third one, you see a for-profit charter school in Washington, D.C. So there's really a good cross-section of the different types of schools, and some that have multiple school districts in them, and some of them that are single school districts. So really what the federal government is doing, if you think of state, they're looking at how a state can really reform education. You look at Early Learning Challenge, what if you just focused on the feeders into the schools, such as the daycare and health centers in the community, as well as the preschools, whether they are private or public, and then the primary grades. And then here, these are school districts. if you give the money directly to the school district, can they implement reforms more effectively? So these, give multiple opportunities for us to develop models that then later, hopefully Congress will provide money to replicate and scale that to others. So the district, as I said, it was $400 million. As the other Race to the Top programs, they're 4-year awards. These were just started in December. So you may be there. Even though it's only 16 awards, there were 55 school districts in 11 states. And those same 4 areas of focus, remember standards and assessments, data system, teacher quality, low-performing schools, are the areas of focus, but they added a couple of things. One is the personalization of learning. You're going to see a lot of that in the grants that are coming from Washington in this new school year. Personalization. And, some can say, well, we've been individualizing learning forever. But what this means, it has an interesting twist. So I ride horses. So it may say, teaching multiplication. So if I have, my mares have, there are this many that have 1 foal and there are this many that have 2 foals, how many, horses do I have in my pasture by X? And it's an interesting way because that personalizes it to me so that it means it's relevant to me. It's the same knowledge and the same skills about mathematics, but the examples are personalized. And if you think about it, a lot of that involves a lot of technology. So I may, if I'm doing a presentation of what I've just learned and I'm using my horse example, I may take my smartphone and take the pictures and integrate that into a presentation about it. So that's what they were looking at in the plans for these. How are they going to personalize learning and make it different than what we have done before? That innovation is what they were looking for. Sometimes it was in STEM, sometimes it was in reading, sometimes it was in math, sometimes it was in the arts. Some were very low poverty areas, rural areas. There always had to be a certain percentage of, socioeconomic hardship, represented. It doesn't mean that the whole district had to be that way or the whole state had to be, but they definitely had to address, that element of the population in schools. The other thing that's interesting, remember when I talked about the states, I talked about teacher evaluation, which was the same in Early Learning Challenge. Well, the kicker here is they also have to talk about how are they evaluating the principals. I remember being in schools where we would have a dynamite principal and we would knock it out of the park. And then suddenly we'd get a principal that was really ineffective, but they put him in our school because they said we were all really strong and the school would continue. Let me tell you, within 3 months, the morale was down, teachers just weren't motivated the same way, etc. So principals as instructional leaders are critical. But here's the interesting one. Superintendents also had to be evaluated. And not just traditionally it had just been by the Board of Education. They really had to talk about, community, the teachers evaluating the superintendents. Hello, that's never happened before. So that's going to be an interesting one to see the results of that over the 4 years of these grants. And does that impact, student achievement? Bottom line, there are 2 things they're looking for. Does it improve student achievement, and does it improve teacher quality? So those are the 2 goals of any of the federal programs, right? So if you're in the states that have, a state award or an early learning challenge, it's not that you need to apply for anything. It means that you need to align your projects with the goals of the plan of those states. In these districts, it's the same thing. How you need to look at the district plan. How does your project align with them? And then you can have the money to help you implement it by the products and services that you need to help you implement that successfully. The awards went to districts, and this is important because, there may be, I said they're considering Race to the Top for colleges, but there may be, Congress may say, no, I want to see more districts. No one in my region got any of these, so we want to make sure, because as I said, it was only 11 states. So some of the members of Congress may say, no, I want another round. So my students or my schools or school districts have a chance. So they went to those using technology, like I said, to personalize learning for each student and giving students opportunities to learn beyond that traditional school day and environment. You're really going to see a theme of brick and mortar, at the school is not, learning does not stop there. You know that as good teachers, as good administrators, but they're putting, money where their mouth is on this one. Also supporting students' transitions throughout their education, including from high school to college and careers. I know I'm from California, and there's a bill in California to do a lot more for students who aren't going to go to our big colleges. How do we help them and the local companies to have more internships, that support careers that don't need, a master's or a doctorate. Another is expanding partnerships with community organizations to provide students with targeted social services like crisis intervention, individual counseling, and life enrichment. You all heard what happened at the University of Central Florida yesterday, and with the student that was going to do a gun massacre again. Well, today, what's the big conversation? What social services should we be providing that we can identify these, students that are at risk that might be able to do this crisis intervention? And the last is providing professional development and coursework options to deepen learning in science, technology, engineering, and math, the STEM fields. So Race to the Top, all of them, in the recommendations for, what states do is, there need to be a lot of STEM. But if you think of, the growth of STEM, that, 18% of the jobs right now require very sophisticated STEM knowledge and skills, and that's only going to increase. So, that's a big one for them. So let's turn our attention to the Invest in Innovation grants. These are the I3 grants. And I had really hoped by the time we did this webinar that the applications would be out and I could give you some specifics about what the focus is this year. But the applications haven't been released because of the whole sequestration issue. So, they'll be coming out this spring because the awards are to be made by the end of December, but not right now. So we may see those, April, May. They usually try and get them out definitely before the summer so people can work on them over the summer at the latest. So there are 3 types of I3 grants. And this is good for you to know now, even though the application isn't ready, because you can be thinking about it, and getting your ducks in order. So as soon as this comes, you are, loaded to get going, on completing that application, because these are big applications. So the first type is development grants. These are $3 million. Second is validation. $15 million, and the big ones are scale up, $25 million. So let's look at what those are. So the goal of all of them is to accelerate achievement. What did I say? Student achievement. And help prepare every student to succeed in college and careers. Are you hearing some repetition here? Are you hearing some themes that are going across all the federal grants? When you write a grant application, you want to say those words. You want to talk about how your plan is going to help every student succeed in college and careers. Okay? So the development grant, these are grants that you're developing a new idea. You haven't done it much. You might have done a small pilot. You know, we just tried something. It would really be great if we could, do it with a larger group of students or, across the district or across a couple of districts. It can be up to $3 million. When it says evidence required, they're saying you should have done some research before. So here all they're requiring is a reasonable hypothesis. What we've seen is, what we've observed is, but we want this grant to test this hypothesis that, we want the equipment, we want the content, we want to train the teachers, and we want to be able to implement it with the students and maybe involve the parents and the community. So a reasonable hypothesis, and you can further develop it and scale it to more students, right? So it's taking a seed of an idea and expanding it. Validation is different. You are validating the idea that's already been implemented. So that's why they give you up to $15 million, because they wanted you to take this across districts within a state, okay? So you may be in a suburban district of 25,000 students. Well, where's the urban district that you can, get some of those schools? Where's some rural schools that can also be involved in this? Okay, so you're validating it across multiple populations. Here you need to have had some evidence. We tried it in a small group. Here's, we tested before and we tested afterwards, and here's the results that we got. So, there's some evidence that this actually does improve student performance. And it's able to be scaled to the regional or state level, okay? Now, scale up means you're going to take this sucker. You've tested it. You've validated it. You're going to take it across the country or multiple states, national, regional. We didn't see any of these awards in 2012. It was only development grants and validation grants. There were no good big ideas. If you have one that you've been doing that you would love to scale, go for it. But boy, you've got to have very strong evidence. You've got to have very sound research that says, that this is a good idea and worthy of being scaled. So just while you're sitting here on this one, kind of in your mind be thinking, do I have just an idea that I'd love to expand upon? Have we done something that, boy, we really want to scale it? Or validate it with a larger population, or do you have a knockdown, great, program that you want to take big time? So that's really what you have. So, be ready to write that grant. So what is I3? Race to the Top for 4-year grants, okay? Invest in Innovation are 3 to 5 years. So a lot of the development grants are only 3 years long, but validation or a scale, they are 5 years long. So you can choose however long you want it. In 2012, they gave about $140 million, and that was the third round that they had done. In Congress right now, there's a bill for the grants for 2013 to have $150 million. So that's a big one. A big thing you notice that I have it in quote is finding your dance partners. So they really like seeing that you're working with others. Maybe it's another school district, maybe it's a local college or university, or maybe it's a local nonprofit that partners with schools. So, you need to be thinking about what dance partners would we bring in that would really help. And let me give you a hint. Washington right now loves rural schools. They have been the neglected child. So they really love you having, rural schools involved with this. So that's something to consider. You get extra points on the application if you do that. And there's another part. This is a kicker that, has scared off some, but don't be scared. Private matching requirement. That means you've got to find vendors such as Mimeo or, other, it could even be a private foundation, a family foundation that will come up with whether it's money or equipment or discounts on equipment or content, or it could be in-kind time. Maybe a company has great trainers that are going to come like every month and do some mentoring and coaching. That can be part, and they quantify that as to how much that is. So say you get $1 million. You've got to be able to have 5% of that provided by private matching, okay? So scale up is only 5%, but if it's $25 million, that's a lot of money. Validation, 10%, and development, those little tiny ones, they really want, the private sector to help make that successful. And I've put in the URL. This will be available to you, which you'll get the information at the end of how you can get that so you can look this up. And I will let Mimeo know when the applications come out, and they will notify you so you can jump right on this. Here's some things you also need to be thinking about. When it says absolute priority, don't worry about the language. It's sometimes people that write these things. It's basically these are the 5 things you need to address. It's not one of the 5 or 2 of the 5. All 5 of them. One is improve the effectiveness and distribution of effective teachers or principals. Now, remember I said rural schools? So maybe you want to do video conferencing with the rural school. You've got a great science teacher that they can't afford to have out in that rural area. So you do some video conferencing with that teacher so he or she can teach in that school. That's the type of thing. Promoting science, technology, STEM education. I think you all, know what that would be. But it's not you might include it, you must include it. 3 is innovations that complement the implementation of high standards, LO, and you know what? They are only going to be awarding Common Core standards, so they really want to see in high quality assessments. Okay? Priority 3, improving school engagement, the environment and safety, and family and community engagement. You're going to see a lot more of that. We've seen it kind of before. It's front and center now. How are you involving the families? Again, technology can really help with a lot of that. And this is for the development grants only, okay? The one above was for scale up and validation. So number 4, innovations that turn around the persistently low-performing schools, just like we've talked about before. And 5, improving achievement in high school graduation in those rural areas, okay? And you get, it's kind of, remember, extra credit. these are the extra credit areas. So people usually only pick one of these so you can really do it well. I've read grants like these for the federal government. If you said you were going to do all of these, I would say there is no way you can and do an effective job as well as the 5 on the previous slide. So pick one, maybe 2, but, you know, that's where. And if you notice again, if it's that early learning outcomes, that's a big one you're hearing. Again, college access and success, students with disabilities. I wouldn't put in for any of the federal grants without talking about how you're going to help students with disabilities. Maybe it's not a major area of focus, but I definitely would say how you are, you know, involving them. And then improving productivity, and finally technology. So the nice thing is, if you put these in here, any one of these, you can also put money next to that so you can actually purchase things to make this happen. What Mimeo has provided for you is a funding guide. And this is just, you know, don't bother to read it now because they'll make this available and tell you how to get this at the end of this webinar. But it talks about these things, it summarizes them. And even though you'll be able to access the recording, it's always good to have something in print that you can look at. Also, it talks about, you know, those 4 areas that I've talked about, you know, standards and assessments, data systems, low-performing schools, and it talked a little bit about the district as well. So your call to action, race to the top. First, just, you know, the number one thing is determine if you're in a state or a district that has race to the top funds. If you aren't, this is a pretty easy one. You know, it's kind of skip to part 2. If you're in those, align your project needs with the goals in the plan. That's how you get the money. That's how you get the time. That's how you get the help, okay? If you need to extend your project, and remember this is brand new news, you need to apply to do so by December 31st. Now that sounds like you've got a long time, but it's kind of, you really want to make sure you've got the results of what you have done, you know, and assess it so you can say, hey, this part of the plan we just, you know, have not implemented yet. Maybe it's a teacher evaluation. Maybe it's your STEM project that you're doing. You really need more time, but you're going to have to really substantiate why. You'll be able to do it, but it's just, you know, you need to know now. It's not one of these things that's due next week, so you can thoughtfully put this together and what will be your new plan for that last year that your extension is. So the last thing is, remember, 50% of the Race to the Top funds, we are talking about multiple billions of dollars, have yet to be spent. That just, it absolutely blows my mind. So invest in innovation grants. This is the second one. Watch for the application to come out soon. I will let Mimeo know as soon as that application comes out, and they can let you know so that you can start. But I wouldn't wait, because once that application comes out, you need to jump on putting that committee together, getting your dance partners in order, getting all of your budgets, everything, your story, your research to substantiate it, etc. So there's a lot to do. So your thinking needs to happen now. And determine what you want to do, how you want to do it, with whom, and how long do you want it to take, 3 to 5 years. So those are the big things. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Travis. Travis?
Thank you so much, Jenny. Man, so much great information that everybody can take away from and run with that. So we are going to be addressing some of the questions that were asked in just a bit. So before we do that, I did want to share that in conjunction with some of the information that Jenny shared about technology and technology products, that Mimeo has been a leader in educational technology for the past 18 years and providing affordable, easy to use, and very effective solutions. Memio technology also empowers both educators and students in all forms of learning to enable real understanding. So whether it's whole group or small group instruction, formative assessments, collaborative learning, or even student-centered adaptive instruction, Memio solutions really help teachers put these strategies into action in a very easy and affordable way. So I wanted to share that. So as we start wrapping things up, I did want to thank you for attending. Of course, you can find more information out about all of the Memio products that were highlighted there on our website, which is memio.com. I also did want to thank Jenny as well as Red Rock Reports once again for all the fantastic information. You can find more information on funding right from Red Rock Reports and Jenny. I'll put Jenny's email address right there in the chat window, so you can access that. So with that said, let's go ahead and move into our questions and answers. We've had a lot of questions and answers put in, and I'll go through a list here and we'll do our best. So Jenny, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So the first question here is from Brian, and he asked earlier in the session, which I did respond to him, but we've gotten a little bit more information, so I'm actually going to field this one. So Brian asked, his question was, Maryland was one of the first to adopt Common Core standards, but when he goes to Memio Connect, which for those of you that may not know, Memio Connect is the teacher community for any Memio user. It's loaded with all sorts of free lessons that teachers can get, all sorts of resources and help to bring them along in their classroom. So he mentions that when he goes to Memio Connect, Maryland is not listed under the states with lessons that are aligned to Common Core, and he said, can you explain? So I did want to share that Memio is aligned to the Common Core state standards, just not specifically to the Maryland state standards. So I wanted to clarify that with Brian. And if you would like more information on this, more alignment on this, please let us know your email address, Brian, and we'll get back with you with more information. So we'll be happy to do that. So if you wanted to, we can pull it off of the registration, or you can simply throw that in there in the chat box, and we'll do that. So thank you very much, Brian. Appreciate that. We'll do that. So now we get into some other questions. The next one is here from Patty. So Patty asked, the money that you are referring to after July 1st, 2013 for Race to the Top, Patty asks, could these funds be reduced because of sequestration, or are they safe from that process?
That's a really good question, Patty. And if you ask somebody in Washington, which I actually have, they will say both. If it's drastic, and especially when they were saying 8.2% cuts, that could be, that they would definitely go into it. For the rest of this school year, nothing will be cut. For next year, I think there may be cuts, at the state level for, those big data systems, because I'll tell you, Washington's not happy with the states that haven't jumped on that, and already gotten that done. So, that's probably how they'll prioritize it if they do any cuts. It's those big state projects, will get a reduction, not cut it entirely, but there, will be, say it's $400 million, there may be a $400,000 cut, that type of thing. So, people are saying no, but those of us who are a little bit skeptical say, there may be a minimal, but they are not going to cut the program entirely at all. They'll give the chance, because to have committed this much and then all of a sudden say, we're going to just cut you off and, you won't have the results of the program, the federal government probably won't do that. If we were in a recession and had sequestration, I might be answering that different.
Okay, great. So definitely some complicated times for sure. So, okay, our next question is from Melanie, and Melanie's question is, when you were discussing the early learning grants in the Race to the Top, can we use these funds at the district level to purchase educational technology such as interactive whiteboards for the early primary grades to assist with with things like circle time, small group instruction, and all that?
Yes, absolutely. You know, if you're buying technology for technology's sake, no. Anytime you're buying the technology, what you've got to be able to do is link it to how it's going to be used and how are you going to measure its impact, okay? But that's not, anything new. We've had to do that for a long time. It's just now, there's people are actually looking at the results. So, that's the one thing. So, for circle time, you'll say, I wouldn't just say we're going to use it for circle time. What is it that you're trying to achieve that the whiteboard can actually help that would improve? Is it improving, collaboration? Is it improving your focus, interactivity with the whiteboard? Is it, oral language around what's going on? It's just, add that other part. What's it going to be doing that, and you can use the money for it, and also how are you going to measure its impact?
Okay, perfect. We have actually another question, another great question from Patty. She asked, can the district Race to the Top funds be used to purchase educational technology such as Memios, and can these funds be used to purchase curricular products? And she was mentioning that because she had just heard about a new program that Memio released called Memio Science, and she wanted to know if these sorts of funds could be used for content such as that program.
Big time. Remember, there are two things. If you just have to say net, what are they trying to do? Improve student achievement. And student achievement is, the core subjects, always will get the most money. And that's, your reading, your math, your science. And what you don't hear a lot about right now is social studies, because different states have different ideas of what should be taught. But definitely, and the standards for those are being drafted now, but we haven't seen them yet. So for now, anything to do with science, again, here are the elements that they're looking for. They're looking, obviously, for a good pedagogical model, formative assessment, meaning ongoing assessment, so that you can check. Does this child, you're checking for understanding. Does this child understand what's being taught? And are they improving, or do I need to intervene? So formative assessment is really much more important than it ever has been in the past. And then, summative, or end of, after you finish using the product, some type of assessment. Again, if you just think it's that good teaching, good content, and measuring the impact.
Okay, thank you. And our last question before we wrap the webinar up is from Nancy. Nancy is referencing private matching vendors, and her question is there a best practice to locating those, in your opinion?
That's a really good question. Some areas that have a lot of companies and a lot of foundations, like I'm in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. There's, multiple sources, whether they're companies, whether they're family foundations, there are multiple ways that we can get matching funds. Some of you in, more rural areas, or, that there's only one industry, sometimes it's a little more of a challenge. So you've got to look at, who are your local people? It can be restaurants, it can be banks, it can be, local trucking agencies. I mean, there are many different things, but what you've got, it's kind of, what do they get out of it, right? And maybe they aren't selling, they're not selling a truck to improve a student achievement, but are you producing, or do you have some vocational training for students that are going to feed their employment needs? So the trick is always to help them see why it's an advantage for them, not just to say we just need to help our community. You know, you really want to think of who they are and what they can benefit, what's the end benefit for them, and it may not be an immediate benefit, a long term, and then vice versa, you know, what can they bring. Also, you need to outline when you go to talk to somebody like that, what are the different ways that they can provide that in-kind support? You know, because sometimes, as I said, you know, when I was going through that section, is it money? Is it equipment? Is it a discount on the products that you're buying? Is it training, free training? Is it a discount on the training? Is it, you know, you just have to be creative and give them a list of the different ways that they can provide that support. If you don't have any, you know, if you don't know about that, if you go to ed.gov and to Race to the Top, if you look at their FAQs, they have a great section on FAQs. In fact, they have, you know, round 1, round 2, round 3. If you look at all of them, there's a huge part of what private matching, you know, what types of private matching are acceptable.
Okay,
that's
very
it for me.
All right, very good. So thank you, Jenny, very, very much. So as we wrap up, as we conclude this webinar, I do want to make sure that all of you know that we will be sending a follow-up email to you after the webinar. That email will contain a variety of information that you'll find beneficial. It will include a copy of the questions and answers that were proposed and answered so eloquently by Jenny. That will also include a recording link of this webinar. If you didn't know, this webinar was being recorded, so if you joined us late, you did not miss a bit. And the email will also include the slide deck that will have all of this information that Jenny put together for you, so you can take it and have all sorts of success with that. So on behalf of Jenny, Red Rock Reports, as well as Memio, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and hope that you have the best of luck in securing funds for your school district. So I do want to mention that as you decide to exit, you can simply go up to the black Collaborate window and click File Exit, and you will exit the webinar, which will allow us to close our recording. So thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you next time. Great night.